This Sunday is the 25th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and during this Ordinary Time we continue to read from Luke's Gospel, and we continue to hear Jesus teaching his disciples. Our Gospel comes from Luke chapter 16, verses 1 through 13. Let's take a listen. Jesus said to his disciples, "A rich man had a steward who was reported to him for squandering his property. He summoned him and said, 'What is this I hear about you? Prepare a full account of your stewardship, because you can no longer be my steward.' The steward said to himself, 'What shall I do, now that my master is taking the position of steward away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do, so that when I am removed from the stewardship, they may welcome me into their homes.' He called in his master's debtors one by one. To the first he said, 'How much do you owe my master?' He replied, 100 measures of olive oil. He said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Sit down and quickly write one for 50. Then to another the steward said, 'And you, how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 cores of wheat. The steward said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Write one for 80. And the master commended that dishonest steward for acting prudently. For the children of this world are more prudent in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. I tell you, make friends for yourselves with dishonest wealth, so that when it fails you, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones, and the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. If therefore you are not trustworthy with dishonest wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? If you are not trustworthy with what belongs to another, who will give you what is yours? No servant can serve two masters. He will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon." Jesus is once again teaching his disciples with this parable. And at first glance, we might just wonder why he chose this particular figure at the center of the parable, a dishonest steward, to teach a lesson. The dishonest steward calls in all of the master's debtors, and he lowers the amount that is owed. Rather than getting nothing from them, he gets something. On the one hand, Jesus would be holding up the steward for taking action, for being creative in his responsibility. He's getting some of what is owed and keeping the workers in their place, perhaps hopeful that in the future he would get all that they owed to the master. One clue to understanding the parable comes from the very next verse after this passage. In it, Jesus speaks about the Pharisees and their love of money. This parable about the inordinate love of money disturbed the Pharisees because they were overly fond of money. We're told at the end of the parable that we cannot serve both God and mammon. There is a tension then presented. The tension is between our love of God and our love of worldly things. Jesus, as in so many parables, is trying to upset the equilibrium of the listeners with this reversal. He is trying to get his listeners to think about what they truly value, what is of greatest importance in their lives. The same kind of probing question is presented to us. Do we love God or love money? Money is not a bad thing. It is something that has value and can be used for good, like caring for a family, like helping those in need. The real question concerns an attitude toward money, a love of money, something that approaches greed. We see in our culture too often, as Jesus saw in his own day, especially in the Pharisees, a love of money. And this love of money that became so consuming that there was no room for God. Having God and a relationship with God as a value was something that was quickly pushed aside by them. The gospel does provide us food for thought. How do we balance a love of God and the good stewardship of our resources, our money and our possessions? Are we able to keep them in balance? What challenges that balance? We do need to dig down deep into our hearts. What is there? A love of God? A love of money? Let the gospel fill your week. See you in church. For now, God bless.